My name's Gretchen Thum. I'm a professor of journalism and media communications here, and we are so glad to be able to bring Big Sonia to Johnson County Community College today. As a special treat, we are going to have a question and answer session. My longtime friend is Regina Warshawski-Court, and she is Sonia's daughter. She is going to be here with us. We also have Dr. Shelley Klein, who is the historian for the Midwest Center for Holocaust Education. She is here with us. And I'm also joined by Jerry Piku. Where's Jerry? Who is a student here, and he is with the Business Marketing and Entrepreneurship Club. So what we're going to be able to do today is we have 2 microphones set up in each aisle, and we'd like you to take advantage of this special opportunity to ask questions about the movie, about Sonia's family, about the Holocaust in general. And you can come up to the mic, and if you would say your name and your major, that would be great. And we'll do that for a few minutes. While you're sort of thinking about your questions and what you might want to ask, I'm going to go ahead and get started with one question for Regina. Okay, so we heard this wonderful story about your mom, and I'm wondering, how in the world did she end up here in Kansas City?
Well, my aunt and uncle were Holocaust survivors as well. So they came to the United States in 1946, and when they got to immigration, immigration asked them where they wanted to go in the United States. And my uncle's response was, well, we don't have any relatives or friends here, but we want to go someplace where the people are kind and good. So they said, okay, we're going to send you to Kansas City. And my uncle's only response was he wanted to make sure it was the United States, because he had never heard of it. So they came to the Kansas City in 1946, very warmly received by the community. And then in 1948, my parents came here, and of course they ended up in Kansas City because that's where my aunt and uncle were.
Thank you. Do we have a student back there?
We do. My name's Cole. I'm currently majoring in business. And my question for you, Regina, is when they first came here, what did Sonia and her husband do for a living, and what made them get into tailoring?
My father was 7 years older than my mother. So he was already, when my mother and my dad came to the U.S., my mom was 23, pregnant with me, and my dad was close to 30. And he had already known the tailoring business when he was in Poland. So when he came to Kansas City, there were Jewish agencies that were in place finding jobs for the immigrants coming over. And so his first job was working in the garment industry, and then at some point he decided he wanted to open up his own tailor shop. And my mother stayed home with the kids, and eventually she decided she wanted to get out and work, so she went into sales. And then when my father became ill with the Parkinson's, she came in and helped him with the business and decided she wanted to keep it going after he died. But she really wasn't a tailor or a seamstress. She just liked getting up and going and being in the business and being part of it.
Awesome, thank you.
We have more questions from students. Don't be shy. I'll ask another one then. Shelley, I was wondering, how representative was the Warshawski family's experience in Kansas City? Were there a lot of survivor families that settled here? Was it a very tiny community?
I'd say for a city of our size, we had a pretty sizable survivor community that came over in that immediate post-war period. We had some ones that came later from Russia in the 70s, but that initial community that came in the 40s, early 50s, I would say the story was pretty typical in terms of that early experience, the community that they formed, and the community life that they were a part of. I think that shows it is indicative of that survivor experience here.
Did they tend to know each other?
Yes, and I think that's something that Regina could speak to very well as too. That how much, because these people didn't have extended families, they'd lost those in the Holocaust, and so these fellow survivors became those extended families.
Yeah, no question. I mean, socially, those were the people that my parents socialized with, so I was in constant contact with other survivors and second-generation people like myself.
Were they necessarily Polish survivors?
I would say
or-
that the majority of the people who came to Kansas City anyway were from Poland. The majority were.
We do have some that came from Germany earlier, but that group that came after the war was I would say, very much Poland and Eastern Europe.
Interesting. Yes.
Hi, my name's Sam. I actually teach in the art department, but I had a question for Regina. She mentioned wanting to keep some of the details away from the kids. I was wondering at what age did she begin to divulge some of the stuff that had happened in the story, and how did that affect you kids, and how did you deal with it?
In my family, I felt like I knew about the Holocaust from day one for two different reasons. One being that their friends were all survivors. You could not socialize with them without at some point you could hear them talking about the Holocaust and their individual experiences. But at home, my parents did not keep it a secret from us. And of course, when we were little kids, I don't have a real memory, a strong memory, except that I knew something horrible had happened to them. I could just sense it. I knew it. They were very different from the other parents, the kids at school, their parents. And then as, children they're inquisitive. They want to know where's our grandparents and what was, your hometown like. And then as we became a little bit older, they would start answering those questions, age-appropriate answers, but they did not hide it from us. And I know that in some families, parents never wanted to talk to their kids about what happened to them. But we did know, certainly by the time I was in high school, I knew all the details for sure. And yes, it made me very, I think it turned me into, maybe I would have been anyway, but a more fearful person. I think that I had a negative, dark view of the world and what could happen to you, and that there are horrible things out there, and it's not going to necessarily happen to the next guy. It could easily happen to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Amira, and I'm majoring in film. And he kind of answered my question, but I know Big Sonia spoke about hiding the tattoo on her arm from you guys, or telling you it was something different. I wanted to know more details on that. Did you find out what it really was in school, or did she come out and finally tell you what it was?
I am turning 70 this year, and when I was in grade school and high school, that was not part of the curriculum. We did not study, the Holocaust was never mentioned. So any information I would have received would be definitely through my family and surroundings. The tattoo on her arm, in her second camp, she was placed in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and that was the only camp that put tattoos on their prisoners. At first, when we would ask my mother, when we were little kids, why she had a tattoo on her arm, we were told that she was given a number in case she got lost, they would know where her home was. And so that kind of made sense to us as little kids. But then as we got older, she did tell us directly what that was all about. And funny thing, last night, the Q&A, afterwards, somebody came up to me who happened to be a neighbor of mine. I didn't know her because she went to Catholic school, so we never really associated, but she said that she remembered my mother's tattoo, and she asked her mother why she had the tattoo, and her mother said, oh, that happened during the war, and that's something we don't talk about. And this wasn't a Jewish family. So I found that very interesting. But I think I will let Shelley maybe add on some more historical information about the tattooing in Auschwitz.
As Regina said, Auschwitz was the only camp that did give those tattoos. So if you've seen someone with a tattoo on their arm, then you know that they were in that particular camp. A unique thing to Auschwitz, probably because all the other camps do give numbers, but those numbers would be on a uniform, not actually on a person's arm. As people move throughout the camp system, if they were part of the slave labor system, often when they're reassigned, they're going to get a different number. People in Auschwitz eventually, sometimes also get sent throughout the camp system, especially at the end. But because of the nature of the camp, I think it was probably assumed that this was a terminal destination. So they did do the tattooing on the arms. I would also like to add something you mentioned there about Holocaust curriculum not being a thing when you were growing up. And I think that that's something that we take for granted today, that for probably most of you, that your education involved at some point Holocaust education. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that for decades after the war, people weren't talking about this. And it wasn't part of regular education. It really wasn't until the 1960s with the Eichmann trial in 1961 that people started going to Holocaust survivors and asking to hear their stories, because the Eichmann trial in Israel had been televised. And they put survivors on the stand. And so that brought the stories of Holocaust survivors into the living rooms of people in a way that it hadn't happened before. And so for survivors, this was in many ways a very legitimizing effect. So they felt that people wanted to hear their stories, because that certainly had not been the case after the war. A lot of them were met with people weren't interested, or there was this idea of everyone suffered, and so there was no one to hear, even if people were ready to talk. And it wasn't until later that we start to get more information from survivors, and it takes time.
I was going to ask you, Shelley. It was because they thought that everyone suffered, and so it wasn't worth focusing on the Holocaust, or were they embarrassed?
Well, there was lots of different reasons, but certainly one of them was, if you're talking in Europe, the idea was everyone suffered. If you're talking in America, I guess there was this idea of moving on, and also you're dealing with people who have had trauma and don't necessarily want to speak about it, and then they're met with people who aren't that interested in the horrors of war, because again, this is a time where there has been a lot of war, so there is this tendency to wrap it in with the war and not see the specificness of this genocide.
And just a kind of interesting fact was that my mother's tattoo had a triangle, she had a triangle underneath it indicating that she was Jewish. And so they also had different symbols if you were a political prisoner.
Yeah, political prisoner, Jehovah's Witness, homosexual, so
Gypsy, yeah.
or Roma, Sinti.
Yeah.
That might be either tattooed on your arm or also placed on your uniform, and that too would indicate, in many cases, the type of treatment that you would receive as well. So different prisoners would be treated better than others.
Hi, my name's Luke Garrison, and I'm majoring in game programming. My question's mainly towards Regina. How much of your father's story do you know?
How much of my father's story?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know the details. I do know he was picked up in 1940 by the Nazis. He was immediately put in a series of labor camps over from 1940 to 1945. And at the end of the war, he was placed in Bergen-Belsen, and that's where my mother was placed. And so after the war, they met, that's how they met, in the displaced persons camp. But unfortunately, like I say in the movie, it just breaks my heart that I just didn't sit down with him one-on-one and just get every single detail like I did with my mother.
But you're doing it now.
Yes. Yes, trying to make up for it.
Hi, my name is Jenna. I'm a marketing major. And Regina, I want to know a little bit about, I know you mentioned that Holocaust wasn't in the curriculum growing up. So what was it like with making friends? Did you feel like no one really knew, or as far as like
definitely growing up, I don't think any of my non-Jewish friends had any awareness whatsoever, seriously, about the Holocaust. And it was something I never brought up or wanted to talk about. So as far as making friends, I didn't have any problem making friends, but I always felt very different, even from my Jewish friends whose parents were born in the U.S. or didn't have that Holocaust experience. I felt very different from them.
Hello, I'm Susan. I teach engineering here at the college, and I have a question for the historian. I understand that before the war, a lot of immigrants, especially Jewish immigrants, really weren't welcomed in this country. And after the war, was there a big change, or was it still kind of like, close the door?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before the war, there was a lot of problems with immigration, and a lot of that went back to certainly there's anti-Semitism within the U.S. There's also just a fear of immigrants in the 1930s and decades preceding the 1930s. So there were immigration quotas that were placed to establish how many immigrants from certain countries could come to the U.S. So if you were from a northern or western European country, you had a better shot of getting into the country than, say, someone from southern or eastern Germany. So if you look at the Jewish immigrants that were able to get out before the Holocaust, a lot of them were actually German. So if you look at the Jewish population of Germany in 1933, it's a little less than 600,000. By 1939, right before the war breaks out, it's less than 300,000. So about 300,000 German Jewish immigrants were able to get into the U.S., largely because America preferenced German immigrants because they were Western and Northern Western European rather than Southern and Eastern. So there's sort of a racial component thing happening there in terms of who we viewed as able to come into the U.S. After the war, and of course there's the famous incident of the St. Louis, the ship filled with Jewish refugees that was refused admittance into the U.S. That was in 1938, I believe. Was refused to come into the U.S., into Canada, and even Cuba. And so the boat had to turn around and go back to Germany. After the war, initially immigration did not relax. It wasn't until I think 47 maybe that Truman really started to, with an executive order, relaxed immigration into the U.S. to deal with this immigration crisis, to bring some of these Jewish refugees into the U.S.
Hello, my name's Jacob DeVries. I'm a journalism major, and my question is about the tattoo as well. I'm wondering if you know why Sonia kept it or didn't try to remove it?
Yes, she has been asked that. She felt that this was such a such a major part of her life that by taking the tattoo off, she would be denying to herself and the world that she was there. So for her, I know that there were some people who have had their tattoos removed, but for her, it was important to keep it.
Okay, thank you.
Also, something to keep in mind too, tattoo removal today is a much more common process because more people are getting and having tattoos, so it's something that people do now. But certainly in the 40s and 50s, that was not a simple process. So those that chose to do it really had to be pretty dedicated to a surgical procedure.
Yeah, that's true.
I heard one question from someone out here that I want to make sure you get your question answered. I believe that she wanted to know if you have ever been able to talk to your aunt.
Oh, yes, of course. She lives in Israel. My mother speaks to her weekly. She's been to the U.S. just once. I've been to Israel once. My mother's been to Israel about 4 times. So yeah, we're in constant contact.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Audrey, and I'm a liberal arts student. And I was wondering if there were any formal apology letters that were given to the survivors like Sonia.
Apology letters, any form of apology letters. From the Nazi, or from the Germans?
Mm-hmm.
Directly to my mother?
To your mother, directly to your mom, to her mom?
No, not at all.
I do know some German towns in the 90s did this sort of weird program of welcoming survivors back. I don't think it was very popular, and I don't think a lot of survivors took them up on the offer, but some places were trying to say, hey, you used to live here, come back. But it was still, at that point, I think, too fresh, and not very many people really felt that it was a sincere or still were uneasy about it. So there were some overtures in general on town-by-town basis, but again, I think it was a pretty failed program.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Berry, and I'm a liberal arts degree. And I wanted to ask you about your aunt's story, if you know anything about how she survived, how she got away, and if you do, would you ever want to go interview her and put that a part of your movie?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you how she survived. She, when in my mother's hometown, they had 6 deportations before they considered her hometown free of Jews. So my mother and her family were sniffed out by the German Shepherd dogs, taken out to the courtyard. She became hysterical, started screaming, they're going to kill us. And my grandfather became very nervous because he thought they probably were going to shoot them right then and there if she didn't calm down. Well, somehow, and my mother isn't even sure herself, when the guard wasn't looking, he grabbed her and ran away. And to make a long story short, she found her way eventually. They found my grandfather and shot him. And she was in hiding with the farmer. When the farmer found out he wasn't going to be paid every week, he kicked her out. She eventually found her way, or was found by a partisan living in the forest. And so she lived in the forest with the partisans for the remainder of the war, which was a couple of years. So she came back to her hometown after the war, and my mother found out she was alive. They reunited, but my aunt had fallen in love with somebody, and they decided they were going to Palestine. So yes, I would love to have the details of her story. My mother tells me she just doesn't like to talk about it. And she has 4 children and 11 grandchildren, and none of her kids seem to be dedicated to get that story out of her. So if she lived here, I think I would be able to do it. But unfortunately, but yeah, God, I'd love to have the details of her survival, yes.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is James, and I study computer information science here. And I just wanted to ask anybody on the panel, what direction do you think Holocaust education is heading in? How do you think it will change once there aren't any survivors?
Well, I'm gonna let Shelley answer that, but I will real quickly say, that's why I came full circle, because it suddenly, about 10 years ago, I thought, wow, the survivors are all dying. Right now, there's just a handful around the world. My mother's 92, and probably within another 10 years, there won't be any survivors. So I personally, as a second generation, feel this responsibility to keep the story going. So that's what I intend on doing, to continue to do.
I think Holocaust education will continue strongly. We have done a really good job of collecting the stories of the survivors that remain. There's a lot of projects around the country and world that are dedicated to documenting a survivor story, getting them archived and online so it's available for as many people as possible. So I think that's going to really help with perpetuating their specific stories. And like any historical event, once the witnesses to that event are gone, it will move certainly into the hands of historians. But I don't think we should worry that we will lose the drive, because certainly there are many people, children, grandchildren, historians like myself, who are really dedicated to this area of study. At the same time, as many of you know who have met a survivor, or if you've been lucky enough to meet Sonja herself, there is nothing that replaces that firsthand experience with talking with someone who's been there. So that is something that we will lose shortly, but while we have it, it's certainly something to really appreciate.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that might be a good place to stop, simply because I know some of you need to get to other classes and to work and other commitments. Before we totally wrap up, though, I think Jerry has a couple of gifts for our guests.
I do.
I'm
So-
giving him
Like
that
this.
expectant look.
We really, the Enactus Club here and Johnson County Community College's student body just really wants to say thank you for you coming out and really providing your mom's story and your family's story and how powerful it is, especially in modern times right now, and the power of positivity and love and how it just overcomes hate in this world. And so when we did watch the film, we were really impacted by the Optimist Creed the most and how powerful it was. Also, the statement of how your mom stated that, you know, when you're down, look further down and you'll realize that you're on top.
Which is amazing for someone 4'8".
And I don't think that there was a dry eye in the room when we were all watching, so that we could, you know, experience this before, you know, we helped to bring this to Johnson County. And so we just wanted to say thank you. We have, each of you guys have 2 tickets to the Carlson Center in here. And we got a tote bag here that has the Optimist Creed screen printed on it. And we do have one for Sonja as well. And we also have a magnet on here that has the Optimist Creed. And then everyone here that's in our audience today will also be getting one of those magnets with the Optimist Creed on their way out. So we just thank you.
Well, thank you so much. If my mother was here, she'd say, put love in your heart, take the hate out. And I have an exciting announcement because we just found out a few days ago that we are doing a private screening in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill for senators and congressmen only. And so we just got our airfare tickets and we're all going, and my mom should be able to go. So we're very pleased and excited about that. And if you want to see the full version of the movie, which has a lot of great stuff in it that is not in the 45-minute, that's it's still playing at the Glenwood. And I don't know how much longer it'll be there, but it's 90 minutes, and you might want to go check it out. So thank you so much for everything. We're so
Thank
thrilled
you,
to be here.
guys. Thank you, Shelley and Regina.